good evening, good night, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am Christy Castillo-Catoni. I'm the primary care physician at our Northern Virginia Family Practice DC location. I am joined tonight. I am lucky to be joined tonight by two wonderful registered dietitians, Allison Tepper and Mary Frances Harley with Tepper Nutrition. Tepper Nutrition is a group of dietitians based out of Virginia. They have two offices, one in Alexandria and the other one in Leesburg, Virginia. And they also see folks virtually, which is wonderful. I'm going to start, if that's okay, Allison, by just doing a quick blurb about you. And then, so Allison, like I said, is a registered dietitian. She's the owner of Tepper Nutrition. She has experience working with clients with a range of different needs, including eating disorders, irritable bowel syndrome, folks with needs for nutrition therapy for different disease states, and of course, folks with the need for background in emotional eating. And so we are lucky to have her tonight. And Mary Frances, if I may, also a registered dietitian working with Tepper Nutrition. Mary Frances is passionate about working with folks that really want to heal their relationship with food and break kind of cycles that have been going on for a long time with those. She has experience in prenatal and postpartum, as well as infant nutrition, so that she comes with that great background. And again, we are so fortunate to have them tonight to speak with us about a very exciting topic to me, intuitive and mindful eating. So welcome, Allison and Mary Frances. Before we dive in, I do want to say, please, if you folks can see the Q&A, the question and answer box at the bottom, please write your questions as we go. If I find that a question is kind of really perfect for a time in the talk, in the conversation, I'll go ahead and I'll bring it in. Otherwise, we'll make sure we cover as many of them as we can towards the end of the presentation, okay? So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Thank you all for joining. Definitely a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, and so excited to share this all with you. We will be discussing intuitive eating for health and well-being. So if you don't know what intuitive eating is, we will be explaining that, going through the principles of it, and then talking about how we might apply it to some everyday needs that you might be experiencing or others that you know that are experiencing. So yeah, we're excited to get started. As Christy mentioned, we are registered dietitians in the Northern Virginia area, work with a range of needs. Even if someone has just questions about food, they're confused, they're seeing a lot of things out there, we're here for all of it. So I'm excited to be chatting with you tonight. So we will just start by explaining a little bit about what intuitive eating is. How I usually describe it is that it's a balance of the science of nutrition, but really taking into consideration each person's unique needs. Every body and every person is so different. A lot of what's out there might be kind of feeling a little bit one size fits all. So we really work to personalize the approach, and intuitive eating helps us to do this. It takes into consideration both like your physical health and your mental health, your relationship with food, kind of takes into consideration all the different layers that might be coming up for someone when we talk about food. So it's not just here's your plan, here's the nutrition facts. We want to know a bit about your history, any cultural experiences around food, what you enjoy, your preferences, just so many different factors. So that's all included in this approach. It's a focus on internal versus external. So really starting to pay attention to your personal body's cues to guide your food choices. And it really focuses on flexibility, enjoyment, regularity with food intake, satisfaction. You're going to hear us talking a lot about eating to provide energy, eating regularly throughout the day. So that's going to be a common theme, and we'll talk about why that's so important. It allows for sustainability, which I think is one of the biggest pieces that we're really looking at. We want to make sure that anytime we're working with someone and they're thinking about incorporating intuitive eating, that it feels sustainable for them long term. There can often be some things out there that are short term, and we can do it for a short amount of time, but this is really based on sustainability. And a really important piece, it fosters a neutral and positive approach to food. We want to make food enjoyable, um, decreasing any fear, frustration, stress around food. That's really a big part of this as well. And I wanted to briefly explain the difference between intuitive eating and mindful eating. Intuitive eating takes into consideration a lot of different principles in terms of like your relationship to food and dieting and things like that. Whereas mindful eating is focused more on using your five senses to bring awareness to your food intake. So oftentimes we can eat, maybe not pay attention. I know it's happened to me before. I look down, oh, where'd my food go? So this really takes into consideration the experience of eating, slowing down. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? The textures. And this helps to enhance awareness where you can start to pay attention to your body's cues. It slows down the eating process, and it can enhance the experience and your satisfaction as well. It's a little different than intuitive eating though, but they both go hand in hand.
Mhm. So why intuitive eating? One of the main reasons intuitive eating is such a great option is that what we have all seen as dietitians kind of starting out is the diet culture of giving these prescribed diets. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's unsustainable. When I first started out as a dietitian, that's what I was doing, is helping people to start on a diet and focusing on weight loss. And what I saw over and over again is people feeling like, okay, I did really well for the first like 2 or 3 weeks and then falling off and then completely swinging the opposite direction because they had been restricted. And so it was very clear from personal professional experience was, wow, this is not working. And so what we see is those short-term results that is not sustainable. The other piece is that there are so many negative impacts of yo-yo dieting. That's actually where a lot of the health risks actually come in. I think the message that is given is that it's tied to the weight, but a lot of times what the real problem is the up and down of even 10, 20 pounds is really doing damage to the metabolism. It's leading to inflammation in the body because of the times of restrictions and times of feast. And so what we see when we zoom out, we see actually the yo-yo dieting is really causing so many more negative effects. We also see that people gain more back than what was lost, is that 95% of people on diets, it fails them in the long run, that weight does not remain off. And so that's why we saw, okay, there has to be a better way. And intuitive eating has been something that's been researched. It's fascinating because it really is just going back to tuning into our bodies and going back to how we really were meant to function. But yet it has been more of a recent thing of learning how this has been so much more research and supported. Other reasons why intuitive eating is that it gives you an opportunity to tune back into your body. So often we get all of these messages of encouragement to ignore hunger cues or even to ignore other cues for our body, like needing rest. And it's so important to find a way to trust your body and getting back to tuning into it and listening to your body's cues. Also gives you an opportunity to improve energy and health status. So what we have seen in working with clients from this lens is that it does help to lower blood pressure. It does help to help people facing things like diabetes or chronic illness. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on, but we have seen that health status is improved with intuitive eating. Does make it lifelong and maintainable. It is sustainable. It is finding a way to enjoy food and also find a way to incorporate fruits and vegetables and find balance on your plate. Other things we'll be talking about. It reduces stress around food. There is so much stress around food, especially facing all of the messages that we get online through TikTok and social media, or even just through the news of all of these messages. Coffee is bad. Coffee is good. Eggs are bad. Eggs are good. And that leads to so much stress. So often we have clients coming to us just saying, I'm overwhelmed. What do I do? What am I supposed to eat? Everything has a negative connotation. And just to be in a place where we can ask them, well, how does it feel feel when you eat eggs? Do you feel good? Do you feel like the protein lasts and you feel energized for the day? Let that lead instead of these messages of whether or not something is like bad or good. And so it reduces stress in a big way. Allows people again to be in touch with their body. Enjoyment. You will keep hearing us, like Allison said, say that word is satisfaction is really the centerpiece of intuitive eating. When we are not satisfied, we keep eating. We keep looking for something, or if you've ever had a time that you are craving ice cream and you tell yourself, I'm going to eat some strawberries instead. You typically end up eating lots of strawberries and then end up eating the ice cream as well. And so instead it's learning, how do we do the eating the ice cream mindfully and enjoy it, and really be able to be mindful in that moment and taste it. Increases self-empowerment and self-worth, realizing that you actually are the center of this, being able to make your own choices that feel good to you. And we apply this too to GI symptoms, chronic illness, so that it feels like you are a part of your own journey with food and getting to do it by self-reflection, which improves your relationship with food and body, and obviously freedom from dieting and the social aspect of feeling limited and restricted. Being free from that is very freeing to all of our clients.
Francis, may I see that one of our folks that joined us asked if you could explain a little bit more what yo-yo dieting is.
Yes. Yeah. So yo-yo dieting looks different for everybody. So for some clients, we see that they've been on every single diet out there. So they've been on Weight Watchers, they've been on Jenny Craig, they've been on the keto, and they keep going through all the different ones. Other people, maybe they've done like one diet over and over again, and they keep gaining and losing the same 15, 20 pounds, 50 pounds for some people. So it can look different for everybody, but typically it's kind of that going on and off of diets and stop, start, which really throws off our metabolism. Allison, is there anything you'd want to add to that question?
No, that definitely explains it. I think when we think of getting off of the yo-yo dieting, it's kind of like getting off of the hamster wheel. And that's kind of what we see, like that, yeah, cycle, that cyclic approach to dieting.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main questions we often get is especially when we're getting a new client, is, well, if we're not going to be staring at the scale and looking at that for success, what will success look like? How will we actually be able to measure that we're doing this well? And one of the first ways is they stop thinking about food all day long. When we're going back and forth through restriction or stressed about all the food rules that we've been taught, we become obsessed with food and we're thinking about food. And that's when people come to us and they say, I'm addicted, or I'm addicted to sugar, I'm addicted to food. And what we most of the time we see is that they have all of these food rules that have made them more restricted mentally, that leads them to being more obsessed with food. Or they're not eating enough, and our bodies are created incredibly. So if we do not have enough food, our body is only going to be thinking about, when is my next opportunity to get food? And we can't focus on our work. We can't focus on our family. We can't focus on relationships the way that we should be, because we are not eating enough. So that's a big one. Improved mood. We see that when people are not as stressed with food, they are so much happier and just able to enjoy life a little bit more. Increased energy, that's a big one. Improved lab values. We do see that. Typically after 3 months of working with clients, depending on like maybe high cholesterol, high blood pressure, A1C levels that are high, we do see that those numbers do come down most of the time with intuitive eating, as they start to get more of a routine with food. Improved GI symptoms, more regular eating really helps with that. And then of course, we're also navigating that with them, which we'll talk a little bit more too. And then of course, an improvement in quality of life. Like I mentioned, not feeling so restricted going into social events, not feeling stressed about the fact that you have a trip coming up and you're going to overeat the entire trip and then have to come back and go on a cleanse, or whatever that's going to look like. It's like, oh, I just keep eating well and choosing to listen to my body, and it stays much more consistent and just improvement in quality of life overall. Now, Allison's going to start diving us into the actual principles of intuitive eating.
Thank you. So yes, there are 10 principles of intuitive eating. We will briefly go through all of them. There's a whole book that explains them all in much more detail. And we talk about it, of course, in sessions as well, but we'll kind of touch on it a little bit. I also want to mention too that these are the 5 principles, and but I wouldn't say that like in a session or when we're working with people, it's like we're going through them one by one in order. It's kind of like, tell us your story and how do we kind of intertwine all of these messages depending on what comes up for someone. But the first step really is to reject the diet mentality. Oftentimes people are starting intuitive eating again because it's like, I want to get off this hamster wheel. I want to approach food in a different way. I don't want to diet anymore. And so how do we take some of those steps to start to think a different way and to shift the mindset from dieting to more inclusion and flexibility and enjoyment of food? So sometimes that might look like throwing out different articles, magazines, unfollowing certain social media accounts, wherever you're getting your nutrition information, and getting that information in a way that doesn't feel supportive. Finding other ways of incorporating nutrition information. This is probably sometimes, though, one of the hardest first steps for people, especially if it's something that they've held on to for sometimes decades. So we're really talking through this first step to find a new way of approaching food and then coming back to it, of course, because thoughts will continue to come up and different things to discuss around someone's experience. Number 2 is to honor your hunger. I know this can seem simple, but we do find so many times part of this equation is that people are not honoring their hunger levels. It's kind of like, okay, I just ate. Why am I hungry again? Or like, I'm trying intermittent fasting or something, like I shouldn't be hungry and I don't want to have to eat. So really this comes back to the basics. Feeling hunger is just a basic human need. It's like needing to breathe or go to the bathroom. We wouldn't ignore those things. And so listening to your body and honoring that basic human need. That's just really saying that your body needs more fuel. And we have a tool to help with that. Number 3 is to make peace with food. So kind of like Mary Frances was saying, ending the good, bad, all or nothing approach to food. How do we take it back to the simple approach of just food is food? It's here to fuel us, and incorporating it in a balance, knowing that all foods fit. Kind of similar to, like, there can be certain expectations where it can feel like, oh, if I start intuitive eating, I'm just going to eat whatever I want. But this is really an approach that allows for a balance of all types of foods, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But in order to get there, we need to start kind of paying attention to like our thoughts around food. Are there any rules? And working through that is definitely a big piece of this. Number 4 is to challenge the food police. So the food police could be some of those messages that Mary Frances was mentioning, maybe in our culture, in the media, and also can come within even like our own circles, family dynamics, friends. If someone's kind of like asking, okay, why are you eating that? Or, if there's certain comments that might come up in different dynamics, challenging some of that, whether it's internally or if you feel comfortable saying something to someone. Sometimes the food police can become integrated within ourselves, though. If we're used to these certain messages, we might be kind of noticing them when we start to eat. If that is the case, then it is this practice of like noticing the thoughts and understanding where they're coming from, and then allowing your body to eat in a way that it needs and challenging some of those. And we come up with different ways to help clients with that in terms of like maybe different reminders or mantras, whatever it might be. Number 5 is to respect your fullness. So again, we have a tool that we'll go over next that will talk a little bit about how to pay attention to your fullness levels. Oftentimes people might get too hungry and then feel overly full. Or it might be like a Last Supper where it's, oh, I'm never going to eat this food again. I'm only going to eat it tonight. And then we eat a lot of it. So finding that neutrality and really kind of practicing with allowing all of these foods can help with respecting your fullness, but that is a practice of this as well, is just paying attention to that. So the tool that we use for guiding hunger and fullness levels is a hunger and fullness scale. So how I usually describe this to clients is that over here we have the 0 or the 2 where we're feeling very, very hungry. So whatever might come up for you, maybe you feel nauseous, irritable. I know for myself, I get hangry, We don't want that. And then over here is 8 to 10, where you're feeling maybe overly full. Maybe you went out to dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, overeating, emotional eating, whatever it might be. As I mentioned, if you start around this 0 to 1 or 2, you're more likely to get to this 8 to 10 range. It's just the way the body works. I kind of will compare it to if you are underwater and you're holding your breath for a while. When you come up for that air, it's not like this graceful sip. We're gulping in that air. And so it's similar to the food. When we get really hungry, we're not going to want a couple carrots. We're going to want really energy dense foods and we want to eat it quickly. And so that is just a normal response. So we want to try to eat around a 3 to a 4 where you're feeling hungry but not starving. And then stopping around a 6 to a 7, 7.5, where you're feeling satisfied but not overly full, knowing that you can always eat again later. And then another number that I like to point out is this 5 right here. If you find yourself drifting towards food, but maybe you're at a 5, you're not necessarily hungry, then this is an opportunity to check in, kind of see if there's anything coming up, anything you might need. Is it emotional? Is it boredom? Is it just a craving? So this just allows for awareness and for us to start to check into what we're noticing, and using that again as our guide in portions and in different food choices.
So to continue on the principles of intuitive eating, the next one, like I mentioned before, is really central to intuitive eating is the satisfaction factor is actually allowing ourselves to enjoy food, which is so sad that we even have to say that, right? We should all be like pushing for that and enjoying that, but our culture has gotten away from that. And so finding ways to really enjoy food again, thinking for a minute before you start to eat, what am I actually in the mood for? Am I looking for something hot or cold? Am I looking for something salty or sweet, crunchy, soft? Really asking these questions to yourself and wondering, what is it that I'm really looking for in this moment? Which leads us to the next one is honoring your feelings without using food. So knowing that, of course, we all started out life with either being breastfed or or given a bottle, and that came along with comfort, right? In those first times of getting food, we were comforted and snuggled, because you can't give a bottle without that, right? And so just from the beginning of our life, we already were taught that food and comfort are intertwined. And we're not going to pull those two things apart. But we do want to make sure that that's not the only coping skill that we're using for our emotions. That's really when the trouble comes in, is when we're not using other tools or other coping mechanisms for our emotions. So being able to recognize, like, okay, I am feeling that I want to eat because I'm stressed. What are the other things that can actually address the stress? While still, maybe you still enjoy pizza after you go to a really hard meeting and you accomplish something that's really challenging that week. You might still get something that you really enjoy, but it's not the only coping skill that you used for that time. And that helps to make sure you don't overeat. Next is respecting your body. This is huge, is making sure that we come from a place of not judging your body or critiquing your body, but respecting it. And that might not mean that you love it. I always think that's important to state with clients, is that you might not look in the mirror and just love what you see, but you can respect it and recognize that its cues and all that your body is doing for you can be respected and honored. Exercise, feel the difference. Exercise doesn't only have to be done by going to the gym and sweating for an hour or running. It can look like, right now, it looks like dancing in the kitchen with my kids in this current life stage. And that's the way I've incorporated movement for myself right now in this crazy life stage with the little ones. But that always is changing. And that's where I encourage all of my clients to just consider, what are the exercises that I really enjoy? Um, and then trying to incorporate that, because we know that the benefits of exercise far exceed just the weight loss or calorie burning piece. That's a very small piece to it, actually, in the bigger scheme. That exercise benefits make such a difference for your mental health. They make such a difference for just having those endorphins. and how your body feels, and even hunger and fullness cues can be more accurate by incorporating movement. So finding what that looks like for you. And then last is honor your health. Gentle nutrition. This is where it's really important to consider, okay, I have high cholesterol. How are the ways that I can make sure I have lots of fiber foods and really incorporate lots of fruits and vegetables and try to lean towards some more lean meats? Those kinds of gentle nutrition, that it's not just coming in of I have to take all of these foods out. I always like to say that gentle nutrition looks like what can I have more of rather than what do I need to take away.
It's a really awesome concept. Like looking at it that way really makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, I always feel like that's just like a big relief from people, that it's like, oh, like I don't have to just think I have to take all these foods out. We can think, wow, let's incorporate more red bell peppers and fiber and yummy things. So, yeah. Building a balanced plate. So with this, I think a lot of times people are like, wait, what do you mean? I'm just gonna like listen to my body. I'm gonna eat French fries all day long. With this also comes teaching our clients what does it look like to go for balance, because when we do have a balanced plate, we're going to feel a lot more satisfied. We are going to be a lot more tuned into that hunger and fullness, and a lot less likely to have the ups and downs of our glucose levels. So when our blood sugar is spiking and then dropping due to different foods that we can be having, so say it's a donut all by itself for breakfast, delicious, wonderful, not a bad option, but we're probably going to crash about an hour later. And so that's where it's like being curious and recognizing, oh, like if I had had 2 eggs with my donut this morning, maybe it would have lasted a little bit longer and I wouldn't have felt that like, oh, I need to go back to bed right now. So that's where learning what it looks like to have a balanced plate. So here we have a few different ways that you can do that. Of course, any foods can be on this list. So just learning carbohydrates, proteins, veggies, and then fats are incorporated as oils and typically cooking with butter. Those things should be just incorporated in a diet. We always encourage clients to also incorporate avocado, olive oil, having fats, but really trying to look at their plate to make sure they're covering these main food groups of the grains, fruit or vegetable, and protein. So here we show a few different opportunities to do this in a few different ways. The energy plate is going to really focus on those grains and starches, probably a really great thing for someone who's more active and incorporating more trainings and running or activity level. That is really important to make sure that they're getting the carbohydrates that they need in order to restore glycogen levels. Then, of course, having the protein and the fruit or vegetable. The peace plate is going to really balance all of these different food groups together. And so it's going to be more of like a third of a plate for each of them. And then the fruit or veggie forward plate, a lot of people love to have lots and lots of fruits and veggies. And this can also be a good option. This could also be a scenario that we could look at for someone who is dealing with a high A1C and wanting to make sure we are still incorporating carbohydrates. We're not fearful of them, but we are doing so in a really intentional way. So that would be how we balance a plate and different opportunities to do that.
We're going to touch on honoring your emotions. We've talked about the principles of honoring your feelings without using food. Knowing that emotional eating can happen, and so it is normal if it happens, but oftentimes, if you're noticing it's happening regularly, if it's kind of like your go-to if you're stressed or feeling emotional, then we have some ways and tools to start to incorporate that. Sometimes it's basics that were listed here. Sometimes it can be, really ingrained, and maybe they need to have a more therapeutic approach to explore their emotional eating and what might be coming up for them. But at least covering it from just kind of like the basics to start. If you're noticing you're at that 5, maybe you're at a 6 on the hunger scale, you're not necessarily hungry, but you're gravitating towards food. The first thing that we ask to check in is are you hungry? Yes, no. If you're unsure, we have something called like the 15-minute rule of like maybe doing something else for 15 minutes, finding an activity, getting some fresh air, and then coming back and checking in. Okay, was this actual hunger or not? Of course, if you're hungry, please eat. But if you check in and you're noticing that desire to eat and you're definitely not hungry, taking a moment to check in on what emotion is coming up for you. Oftentimes it can feel like we have an emotion and we're in the kitchen, but this allows us to really kind of take that pause and tune into our needs. So what emotion might be coming up for you? Maybe it's stress, boredom, sadness. There's a whole range of emotions, but just giving yourself some time to actually identify it and maybe sit with it a little bit. And then asking yourself, yes, what do I need in this moment? Is it another way to take care of myself? Do I need to sit with the feelings, distract myself? Are there affirmations or mantras? This list of like reading, journaling, movement, it is expansive. It can be anything that works for you. So maybe just taking even a moment to write down 5 things that might feel good or help to reduce stress if you're noticing that desire to eat is coming on. But again, sometimes people will need that additional support in navigating this, which definitely can be beneficial. And then if you do decide to eat, being kind to yourself, any critical thoughts or judgmental thoughts that come in around eating can sometimes exacerbate the emotions and then exacerbate the desire to eat. And it also doesn't feel very good. So definitely just kind of practicing some gentleness if that does come up. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about how we might apply intuitive eating to various needs. We can definitely talk about a lot of different scenarios, but some of the top topics that kind of came to mind were inflammatory conditions, GI conditions, perinatal health, women's health, and I know we're hearing a lot about GLP-1s and how we might support someone if they are on that path.
Yeah, so with inflammatory conditions, there are so many, unfortunately. Autoimmune disease states is incorporated, cardiovascular disease, rheumatoid arthritis, any of these would be kind of considered under that big umbrella of inflammatory conditions. But a lot of different things are underneath this umbrella. And some of the things that we will work on with our clients is making sure that there's adequate intake. Like I said earlier about the blood sugar, trying to make sure the blood sugar is staying fairly balanced and not big peaks and valleys. This does help to prevent the release of cortisol. So regular intake throughout the day, making sure adequate intake is happening so that we're also not getting into a stress state with our bodies as well. So that frequent small intakes throughout the day, small frequent eating so that we're also not overloading our system. Balanced meals, like we just went over, is making sure that meals have all the components that your body needs and that you're getting lots of fruits and vegetables throughout the day because those are so helpful from an anti-inflammatory perspective. Some foods to incorporate for inflammatory conditions are, of course, vitamin C. We all know that that helps with our immune system so much. So that's going to be your berries, your strawberries, of course, oranges. Any of those would help to incorporate vitamin C. And then trying to make sure that we have mono and polyunsaturated fat. So, like I mentioned, the avocados, almonds, olive oil, any of those will really help to make sure that everything is working the way it should with the fat intake. Carotenoids, so trying to make sure that you're having lots of fruits and vegetables that are orange and red, so those help to lower inflammation as well. Omega-3 fatty acids, chia seeds, those are always great to incorporate into oatmeal, or chia pudding is delicious, great snack. Polyphenols, trying to make sure lots of fruits and vegetables. Again, you are doing a great job. If you could just think fruits and vegetables all day long is really going to help with lowering inflammation just across the board. And then fiber is another thing that we're going to incorporate and just check in with our clients to see what their level of fiber is, because that helps to make sure things are getting carried out of the body that are not helpful for the body. Next is we often have clients that come to us and talk to us about fertility concerns or prenatal health and planning to make sure that they're doing everything they can for growing a little one. And so ensuring adequacy is number one. What we see, especially with struggles with fertility, is if our body is not getting enough food throughout the day, then things like a regular cycle and regular ovulation are going to be things that are going to drop off, because the body is going to be functioning on or focusing on those important things like keeping the heart beating, and the brain functioning. And so some of those other things are going to drop down. So we want to make sure we're getting enough in. And of course, that's really important as well from the prenatal side, is making sure that when people are navigating early pregnancy symptoms, that they are still getting enough, that we can think through small frequent eating so that we still get enough even with morning sickness or any other symptoms. Of course, navigating symptoms, talking to clients, a lot of times we'll see some GI symptoms with this. Constipation is really common. So making sure that people are having enough fiber in their day, talking about incorporating things like kiwi to help to promote regular bowel movements, and navigating things like that. Of course, simplifying meal and snack planning. A lot of times people are exhausted through pregnancy or exhausted through fertility treatments, and that process too. It can be take a really big toll. And so trying to help and work with clients to make sure that we can simplify meals and snacks so that it feels easy for them and not overwhelming. Critical nutrients to consider in this stage of life is folic acid, omega-3, iron, and adequate protein. Really trying to make sure that you're getting enough protein to take care of you as well as baby, because we know in pregnancy, the baby actually is number one for your body. And so baby is going to get what baby needs, but that could be at the expense of the mother. So we want to make sure that we're getting an abundance so that both baby and you are taken care of. And then, like I mentioned, the assessing fiber intake, making sure that there is enough fiber happening regularly throughout the day to support your body. Next is what we are seeing a lot of is the GLP-1s. And a lot of people will think, okay, well, is that taking your job away? And no, not at all. It's actually even more bringing attention to our job and the importance of what it means to be a dietitian and what it means to be working with someone. So, ensuring adequate intake, we see when people start with the GLP-1 nutritional support, what they need is to make sure they're getting enough because they do no longer not feeling hungry. They're not getting a lot of the food messages that they had been before, which has been a big relief for a lot of people, but we still need a certain amount of nutrition in order to be functioning at our best, in order for our brain to be functioning and everything to be working at its best self. So definitely important to make sure they're getting enough. Navigating GI disturbances, a lot of times this can be kind of part of starting the GLP-1s, and we help clients to navigate what can we do to address these symptoms and navigate the GI problems in the best way with food. Then, of course, long-term planning. Most people don't want to have to be on something for the rest of their life. And so thinking through what will it look like to come off? How can we make sure we have a healthy relationship with food? How can we make sure we're incorporating intuitive eating on the other side of this so that it doesn't go back to the yo-yo dieting or some emotional eating or whatever it looked like before, helping clients to kind of bridge over to a healthy relationship with food. And then, of course, learning how to reassess hunger and fullness cues. Once someone has been on the GLP-1, we often see that their hunger and fullness cues are not as accurate. And so needing to kind of have more of a meal plan and schedule for their day while they're on it. And then when they come off of it, learning what does it look like to actually listen to hunger and fullness cues and stay between that zone that Allison was talking about before.
Great. So we're going to start now with menopause. This definitely is a topic that comes up quite regularly with clients. A lot of times going through menopause or perimenopause will prompt someone to reach out because their body is changing and they want to know. So there's something food related that will help them to navigate, this new season in their life. And there's so much out there for all of these different things, but especially around menopause of like eat this and that and all the different things that might help you and just, prevent weight gain and things like that. I first want to mention that this time of life, it is a normal response for the body to change. And so if we can kind of normalize that, and, that's a big piece of this. And then when it comes to the food, it's kind of similar to what we've been talking about, really focus on balanced, nutrient-rich diet, eating regularly throughout the day in order to keep your blood sugars nice and stable, to keep your metabolism strong, to fuel your metabolism. So we're really keeping things steady, I would say. And again, too, we're just focusing on making sure to focus on like what we're adding in versus what to take out. We want that regularity, and also to, of course, for metabolism and blood sugar, but also to keep energy levels up. We know that people are busy, and so we want to make sure that people are energized for their day, whether they're going through menopause or not. So that's a big piece of what we're incorporating as well. When it comes to nutrients to focus on, I will say that there is a lot of research that continues on this topic. We definitely know that protein is essential at any time of life, but especially as we hit menopause, in order to prevent muscle loss. We want to keep our muscles strong, which also helps with bone health. So protein is key for many reasons, but especially that. I'm going to move down here to increase calcium levels. So calcium intake increases at 51 years of age or postmenopause for some people, depending on the age, up to 1,200 milligrams per day, again, for bone health. And in addition to calcium, we're also looking at vitamin D. We want to prevent any fractures or any issues that can sometimes come with age. And so other things that are being researched, I would say, but there's no harm, again, in trying some of these different foods to see how it feels. And they are healthy foods that are high in fiber and nutrients. And when we're thinking about things like hot flashes and night sweats and things like that, there is some research that can show that different foods like phytoestrogen-rich foods like flax seeds, berries, apples, rice, lentils, soy, those can sometimes help. So it is a little bit of trial and error to see what works for you, but more research is being done. Definitely something though that we see can help with the night flashes, the night sweats and hot flashes will be like a reduction of coffee and alcohol. Again, we are focusing on all the things that you can enjoy, but with the gentle nutrition of like just taking into consideration some of these options that can play a role in symptoms. So a bit of trial and error without going too restrictive. And then, of course, I just had to mention strength training just in terms of maintaining muscle mass, since it is naturally lost as we get older, which then can impact strength and metabolism and things. So always really important for bone and muscle health. And then GI conditions. So when we are working with GI clients, it can be a little bit of trial and error. We do personalize the approach depending on what someone's coming in with, depending on their condition. But if we're just thinking of like general GI function and making sure that things are moving adequately, we're focusing again on eating regularly throughout the day. If there's points of restriction, our intestines are not going to work properly, our hormones can be impacted, which can impact GI symptoms. So regular balanced eating throughout the day is definitely key to keep things moving. And then, of course, we're focusing on fiber intake. If we're focusing on fiber-rich foods, it is going to be whole grains, fruits and vegetables, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, avocado. Fiber helps, again, to kind of keep our bowels regular. Fiber also binds with cholesterol in the body, so it can be really good to excrete cholesterol and to help with heart health. So fiber is definitely important, 25 to 35 grams per day, and trying to get it in throughout the day at various times so that it can kind of like add up and you're not eating too much fiber at once, which can also be problematic. As we increase our fiber intake, we also want to increase our water intake, which can also help with GI symptoms, focusing on probiotic-rich foods, yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, those types of things can be beneficial. Movement just kind of gets things moving as well. So, we talked a little bit about exercise, finding what works for you that's enjoyable, that feels sustainable. And then stress management can definitely play a large role in our GI health as well. I mentioned that, of course, like there's stress in our everyday lives, but as we were talking about earlier, like if we're stressed around food, that can also kick up our nervous system and then impact our digestion. So taking deep breaths before eating, eating in a relaxed state. But then there's also, I know we were talking about, there's other resources too that kind of focus on GI and stress reduction. So there's a lot of really great tools out there as well for that. And then I wanted to just briefly mention low FODMAP. because we do work with a lot of clients with IBS. And sometimes when they're coming in for IBS and we're following something called the low FODMAP diet, which is an elimination approach to help to identify any food-related causes of different symptoms, it can feel a little bit restrictive, but we try to really incorporate the low FODMAP diet in a way that feels inclusive of various foods. So if you are someone who does low FODMAP, really focusing on all the foods you can eat, getting in a good balance of nutrients, trying out different recipes, having fun with it. There's so many great low FODMAP products now that help to reduce symptoms, that also taste good and allow you to have flexibility and enjoyment. So if we're going over the low FODMAP diet with someone, we are having fun with it, making sure that you're incorporating a lot of different food groups, and also there's a lot of fun foods and desserts and things that are available as well. So just wanted to mention that in terms of how we incorporate it with an intuitive eating approach. So we could talk all day about intuitive eating, but to wrap it up, here are some resources that we will regularly share with clients, some of our favorites that we'll recommend that kind of focus on this topic if you're interested in learning more. And we will open it up to any questions.
Thank you both. You've covered so much, and it's been such a lovely, lovely introduction, I think, to what for many people is kind of this unknown concept that seems really attractive. And just a few words that really stick out to me that you said throughout the presentation is a personalized approach, the not one size fits all, right? I think that's really important. The tuning back into our own body, many times in our hustle and bustle, we forget to check in with ourselves, like you said. And I think that concept really sticks out. And we certainly all need to practice it, but I think the more you practice it, the more it becomes part of your day-to-day, right? And so I think that was such a big takeaway. And then not forgetting about the enjoyment and satisfaction piece of eating, right? Because it becomes such a headache for so many of us, right? It becomes so restrictive, and it's almost, there's fear into it. And so going back to enjoyment and satisfaction is just really nice concepts to go back to. So thank you again for this wonderful presentation. We do have a few questions, if that's okay. So I am going to try to cover them all. So we have one participant who says that they eat healthy, oatmeal, salads, chicken, veggies, fruits, but always feel that they need dessert afterward, and are wondering how they can break this addiction to sweets.
Mary Frances, if you want to start with that.
Yeah. I would say, it's typically not the issue of having like one Dove chocolate or enjoying one food that's really like a problem. So I would actually encourage you to enjoy something sweet if you're craving that, is incorporating it, but thinking through how can I do this in a really intentional way. On the side of your lunch, putting a Dove chocolate. I always encourage my clients, like, put a huge bag of Dove chocolates in your freezer. And then when you pull them out, they're cold and you really have to let it melt. You can't just like chomp down on it real quick. So it reminds you to eat mindfully and to incorporate that on the side of your lunch or on the side of your dinner, or doing both. It's not going to be two Dove chocolate that's really going to cause a problem when it comes to your nutrition. It's going to be the whole bag of Dove chocolates that you're going to eat if you don't incorporate something sweet more regularly. Some other things that can be helpful if you are feeling like, okay, I keep thinking about something sweet, is exploring some options. I love there are these true fruit, dark chocolate, dipped strawberries. So thinking about like what are some things that you'd really enjoy that maybe also pack a punch with like some fiber. So maybe that's like the true fruit, or doing a bowl of strawberries, and incorporating something that like tastes really sweet and also has like some good components when it comes to nutrition. I'll also say dark chocolate is high in magnesium and so helpful in that sense, and helpful during a time of the month. So all of those things can be really helpful for just thinking like Dove chocolate has benefits too. So I would say incorporate it. Allison, anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that that would be my first recommendation is to allow yourself to have it. Sometimes it can feel addictive if like you're going in and it's just like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this or why is this happening? And so just allowing yourself and enjoying it and knowing that eating dessert is a normal part of the day. Something else I'd like to point out too is that we have different tastes, right? We have the sour and sweet and salty, and those are all different parts of our tongue and different things that kind of like, we want to incorporate throughout the day. And so I think it makes sense that we want that sweet. It's like part of, how we're made up. And so incorporating it and just kind of like having that neutrality around it.
Well, thank you. Let's see, we have another participant who is wondering if we should identify and document our true comfort foods for inclusion in meal planning.
So that's actually something that I do with a lot of my clients, and I create a toolbox and at the top of our toolbox is 5 foods, naming foods that you think of for comfort foods. And thinking through, a lot of times what I find after we talk about those 5 foods is that they're always primarily carbohydrates. And we know that scientifically, when we have carbohydrates, we do release serotonin. So it makes sense why we get comfort because chemically we are responding with a happiness hormone when we eat those carbohydrate foods. Now, I will say that, and I also see that for some people it's a plate of wings or something different. So it's not always carbohydrates, but a lot of the times it can help to just identify what are my comfort foods and how do I incorporate those. I always give the example of, like I said, pizza. Friday nights has always been like a pizza night for my family, and I can see how that would be like, okay, the end of the week, all the stress, I am going to eat tons and tons of pizza, right? That could be so easy to be coming down from the week and do that. But if it has been a stressful week, the goal is that I've, gone for a walk, spent some time with my dog, talked to my mom, having that long list of tools that you're also using and then enjoying that pizza. So it's a great idea to identify what your comfort foods are and incorporate them regularly, and also checking in with other coping skills you're using.
Absolutely. Great.
Thank you for the tip, I guess. All right. So we have someone wondering, as a slightly overweight widower cooking for one, how does this person plan a health eating pattern when she's just cooking for one person?
Yeah. So I think one of the main things I recommend is batch cooking of, making something for yourself and allowing yourself to reheat it throughout the week. If you like leftovers, we sometimes work with clients who don't like leftovers and then we have to get a little bit more creative. But then that is something that you enjoy. It can sometimes be nice just to cook once in the week, maybe twice, have extra servings of it, eating throughout the week, maybe freeze it for later so that you can have individual portions at later weeks as well. So that batch cooking is definitely something that I recommend. And also kind of keeping it simple. I think sometimes we feel like, okay, in order to get in a good balance or a healthy meal, we have to kind of cook something elaborate. But even if it's something, basic or, just kind of putting things together like bowls or kind of recreating some of your favorite restaurant foods in a simple way. Sometimes we'll just stick everything into the oven for roasting, or making like a quesadilla or something, that just feels very doable and easy and kind of you can have your repertoire of easier foods. That can sometimes take some of the guesswork and the challenge out of it. And then sometimes too, I know that, when I was, living alone, inviting people over felt like a nice opportunity to eat with others and cook for others and just share in that experience. But batch cooking would probably be my number one of simple, easy meals. Mary Frances, do you have any other thoughts?
I would just say sheet pan meals. You mentioned kind of being able to roast everything. Been a big hit to do chicken sausage, sweet potato, and broccoli and throw it all on one sheet pan and roast it in the oven for 25 minutes and you're done. So that can be a really good one. And again, like you said, if you do that, you could probably make 2 or 3 meals out of that and you're kind of taking care of yourself for the next few days.
Cool. All right. So we are wondering how much protein should you intake daily?
Yes, great question. So I I'm glad that was brought up because there are a lot of recommendations out there in terms of protein needs, and right now it's kind of trending in for protein is a very it's a hot topic of conversation. When we think of protein needs, it is a calculation that is actually based on one's weight. And so in order to get your recommended protein intake, you would take your weight, divide it by 2.2, and then multiply it by 0.8. I can maybe email that out later. And so that would be kind of like general, needs for protein intake. It does increase if someone's an athlete. It does increase during menopause or other phases of life. And so sometimes it might be taking your weight, dividing it by 2.2. And then that can be like the higher range, depending on the stage of life, or if someone's training or, needs a higher protein intake. But again, making sure that it's in balance with other food groups that you're getting in your carbohydrates and your fruits and vegetables. The thing that we see that can be most harmful is if someone's really over focusing on protein and then missing out on other food groups, which can decrease fiber intake and nutrient intake, or if they, to hit their protein levels, they're like adding in all these extra meals or supplements and protein shakes and things like that. And then so we try to kind of steer clear of that as well. So really trying to get in just that balance. If you follow the plate and eat it regularly throughout the day, you can hit it pretty well. I always want to kind of mention like 1 ounce of protein is 7 grams of protein. So if the size of the palm of your hand is like 3 ounces, you can get 21 grams just from that. So it can go a long way. But yeah, Mary Frances, any other thoughts related to that?
No, yeah, I think just like splitting it up throughout the day. That's definitely something I see is people trying to do those like super powered protein shakes and get 50 grams at once. And it's like, oh, okay. So definitely wanting to balance it with your meals.
Thank you. And we got one more question. Which veggies are nutritionally better when they're frozen? When they're bought frozen.
Allison,
I mean, really, when it comes to frozen vegetables, because they are picked and then frozen fairly quickly, they're able to retain their nutrients even sometimes better than fresh foods that like travel across the country or from other countries. So I would say the most frozen vegetables are going to be a great choice. I'm not sure if any necessarily stand out is going to be higher in nutrients when they're frozen, but just kind of any vegetables that you enjoy fresh, you can definitely incorporate them frozen. So Mary Frances, any other thoughts about that?
I feel like it can definitely be nice and easy to be able to pop something in and just warm it up and know that I think there's been some misinformation that frozen veggies are less healthy. And yeah, like you said, they're picked at prime time. And so it can actually be really beneficial for you and simple. So
A win-win.
win-win.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're muted.
oh. Okay, yeah, you're muted.
Thank you. I said I'm not going to do this, and I did. All right. So somebody's wondering if the slides will be available after our call, and they will typically by a week. You can go into the Northern Virginia Family Practice website, and there is I think it's the media section, and we usually will post the presentation along with any notes that our panelists want to make available to you. So we'll definitely have their contact information. And maybe even the calculation for approximate protein intake and things like that, that kind of little points that we make helpful. And then we also break it down by time of within the hour at 20 minutes, we spoke about this so that you can navigate the presentation a little bit more easily. So yes, this will be available. And I think that we have covered all our questions. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everyone on the attendee side as well. Tepper Nutrition, again, you folks are 5 registered dietitians, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so like I said, they have offices in Alexandria, Virginia, and Leesburg, Virginia. They also see folks via telehealth in the DMV and surrounding states as well. So if you wonder if they will be able to see you, just reach out. They have their contact information here. Is that the best way to reach you folks? Just to send you an email, go on the website?
Yeah, and on our website, there's our phone number, anything, fax number, whatever is preferred to reach us. We are available.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again for the lovely content, and we look forward to collaborating.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Of course. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks again.